The silent agreement. The first time Camille Foster saw Harrison Reed, she wasn't impressed. The billionaire stood on the deck of his luxury yacht, designer sunglasses hiding his eyes as her team of marine biologists boarded for the fundraising presentation. His reputation preceded him. Telecommunications mogul, ruthless businessman, generous philanthropist when cameras were rolling. Camille had prepared herself to deliver a passionate pitch about ocean conservation to a man who probably cared more about the tax write-off than the dying coral reefs. Dr. Foster, I presume? His voice was unexpectedly warm as he extended his hand. I've read your research on microplastic contamination. Brilliant work, she blinked in surprise. You've actually read my papers? A smile played at the corner of his mouth. All three of them. Your methodology on tracking particulate movement through currents could revolutionize cleanup efforts. Something shifted in that moment, a subtle realignment of her assumptions. Throughout the presentation, Harrison asked insightful questions that revealed genuine interest. When he pledged $5 million to her research institute, the largest donation in their history, Camille found herself lingering after the others had left. Why marine conservation? She asked as they stood at the yacht's railing, watching the sunset paint the Pacific horizon in strokes of amber and gold. Of all the causes a man like you could support. Harrison removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes the color of stormy seas. My grandfather was a fisherman before the waters were contaminated. He used to tell me the ocean remembers everything we've done to it, and everything we've failed to do. Their conversation stretched into dinner. Just the two of them, the yacht's staff discreetly invisible. Harrison spoke of his telecommunications empire built from nothing, his vision for sustainable technology. Camille shared her childhood in a coastal village, her determination to save the waters that had shaped her. Neither mentioned the platinum wedding band on his left hand. The invitation to continue their discussion at his private office came 3 days later. Professional, perfectly appropriate. The kiss that followed their second meeting was neither. His touch felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. I shouldn't have done that, Harrison whispered, still close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips. I'm married. Then why did you? Camille asked, her heart racing despite her better judgment. His fingers brushed her cheek. Because in 30 years I've never met anyone who makes me feel like I can breathe. Eleanor Reed appeared in all the society pages. Elegant, poised, the perfect corporate wife who chaired charity events and stood beside Harrison in photographs. Their marriage was a business merger, he explained during stolen afternoons in his penthouse apartment. 15 years of polite coexistence, separate bedrooms for the past 5. We agreed long ago to maintain appearances, Harrison said, as Camille traced patterns on his bare chest. The company's image, investor confidence, it's complicated. Complicated, Camille echoed, wondering when she'd become the kind of woman who accepted such terms. For 6 months, they existed in carefully carved spaces, weekend trips disguised as business travel, late-night phone calls, text messages encoded in marine biology references. Harrison funded a research outpost on a private island where they spent a perfect week cataloging rare sea creatures and mapping each other's bodies. I'll leave her, he promised, on their last night there, his face serious in the moonlight streaming through the windows. After the merger with Global Tech is complete. The board would never approve if my personal life became volatile right now. Camille wanted to believe him. She almost did. Until the morning she recognized the symptoms her mother had experienced years earlier. The test confirmed what her body already knew. She was carrying Harrison's child. As she stood in her bathroom staring at the positive result, her phone lit up with his message. The silent agreement between us has become the loudest thing in my life. I don't want to live without you anymore. 2 more months, and I can make everything right. I promise. Camille placed her hand over her still flat stomach, wondering if promises made in shadow could ever survive in the light. Tides of change. The ocean had always been Camille's sanctuary, but today its rhythmic waves brought no peace. Standing on her apartment balcony, she pressed one hand against her abdomen where the first subtle swell had begun to form. 12 weeks pregnant, and the reality was finally settling into her bones. She'd told Harrison 3 days ago in the secluded booth of a restaurant 30 miles from the city. His reaction wasn't what she expected. Not panic or hesitation, but a radiant smile that transformed his usually guarded expression. "A baby," he'd whispered, reaching across the table for her hands. "Our baby." His joy had been so genuine that Camille allowed herself to believe the fantasy he painted. A house overlooking the water, morning walks along the shore, a nursery with walls the color of a perfect summer sky. He showed her real estate listings on his phone, properties far from the city where his company headquarters dominated the skyline. 8 weeks, Harrison promised. The global tech merger goes before the board in 8 weeks. Everything changes then. Now, watching the tide retreat from the shore, Camille dialed the number of the obstetrician Harrison had arranged, an exclusive practice in another city, discreet and expensive. The receptionist confirmed her appointment for Friday. "Mr. Reed's office has handled all the arrangements," the woman added, "including transportation." Of course he had. Harrison orchestrated their relationship with the same meticulous attention he gave his business dealings. Sometimes Camille wondered if that should worry her more than it did. Her phone vibrated with a message from Olivia, her research partner and the only person who knew about Harrison. "Have you seen this? Channel 6 business report." Attached was a video clip of Harrison at a press conference, Eleanor standing beside him in a tailored navy suit. The reporter's voice narrated over footage of them entering the venue. "Reed Telecommunications is positioned for the industry's largest acquisition this decade. Though rumors of Harrison Reed's declining health have investors concerned." Camille's breath caught as the camera zoomed in on Harrison's face. Had he always been that pale? The shadows under his eyes that pronounced? She watched him sway slightly at the podium, Eleanor's hand discreetly steadying his elbow. She called him immediately. No answer. 3 hours later, her phone rang. "It's nothing," Harrison assured her. "Exhaustion and a touch of anemia. My physician is adjusting my supplements." The reporter mentioned health concerns. "Stock manipulation tactics," he interrupted. "Our competitors would love nothing more than to spook our investors before the merger." Camille wanted to believe him, but something in his voice rang hollow. That night, she researched his recent public appearances, noticing the gradual weight loss, the increasing pallor. How had she missed these changes during their time together? Across town, Eleanor Reed sat in her home office reviewing medical reports. The oncologist's prognosis remained unchanged. Aggressive pancreatic cancer, stage 4, metastasized to the liver. Experimental treatments were buying time, months, not years. She closed the file when she heard Harrison return home. Their marriage might have evolved into a partnership of convenience, but 15 years created its own kind of intimacy. She knew when he was lying. She'd known about the affair for months, the late meetings, the weekend conferences that didn't appear on his official calendar. What Harrison didn't realize was that Eleanor had already met Camille Foster at a fundraising event last year. She'd watched her husband's expression change when the marine biologist spoke passionately about ocean conservation. Eleanor recognized that look. It was how Harrison used to gaze at her many years ago. "The board is asking questions," Eleanor said when Harrison entered. "Jenkins called me directly." Harrison loosened his tie, sinking into a chair. "What did you tell them?" "That you're undergoing treatment for exhaustion. That the merger is your priority." She poured him the special tea his doctor had recommended for nausea. "I've always protected your interests, Harrison." "That's our arrangement." He took the cup, their fingers briefly touching. "I've never deserved you, Eleanor." "No," she agreed softly. "But that was never the point of us, was it?" Neither mentioned the text message that had appeared on his phone during dinner 3 nights ago, the one Eleanor had glimpsed before Harrison quickly turned the screen away. A message about a doctor's appointment and the first ultrasound images of a baby. Harrison had always wanted children. It was Eleanor who couldn't have them, a fact discovered early in their marriage. Another fracture in their foundation. That night, Harrison sat alone in his study drafting emails to his attorneys. One set of documents outlined changes to his will. Another contained provisions for a trust fund to be established for an unborn child. The third was a letter to Camille, explaining everything he hadn't had the courage to tell her in person. He never sent it. Instead, he called her at midnight, voice husky with emotion. "I've found the perfect house." Right on the coast. With a research facility we could convert for your work. I want to take you there tomorrow. It's really happening, isn't it? Camille asked, hope and doubt tangling in her chest. Everything I promised, Harrison replied. Everything we deserve. As he ended the call, a sharp pain radiated through his abdomen. He doubled over, knocking a glass of water onto the medical prescriptions scattered across his desk. The storm breaks. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Camille ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. The news had broken across financial channels first. Harrison Reed collapsed during a board meeting, rushed to Mount Sinai Medical Center in critical condition. She'd tried calling, texting, even contacting his personal assistant, who merely replied, "The family has been notified." Family. A single word that excluded her completely. The private wing of the hospital was guarded by security personnel who blocked her path. "I need to see Harrison Reed," she demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Only immediate family is permitted." Desperation made her reckless. "I'm carrying his child. Please, I need to know if he's all right." The guard's expression softened slightly, but he shook his head. "I can't authorize. Let her through." The voice behind her was calm, cultured, instantly recognizable from countless Society page photographs. Camille turned slowly to face Eleanor Reed. Harrison's wife stood with perfect posture in a charcoal gray suit, her auburn hair swept into an immaculate chignon. No tears, no hysteria, only a measured composure that seemed more terrifying than anger would have been. "Mrs. Reed," the guard began. "Hospital policy." "I understand the policy," Eleanor interrupted. "Dr. Foster is here at my request." Camille's confusion must have shown on her face. Eleanor met her eyes directly, an inscrutable expression crossing her features. "Follow me," she said simply. They walked in silence to a private room where machines beeped in rhythmic counterpoint to Harrison's labored breathing. Tubes and wires connected him to monitors displaying numbers that Camille, with her scientific background, recognized as dangerously abnormal. "He didn't tell you," Eleanor said. Not a question. Camille moved closer to the bed, her fingers hovering above Harrison's unnaturally still hand. "Tell me what?" "Terminal pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed 8 months ago." Eleanor's voice remained steady. "The prognosis was 6 months. He's been undergoing experimental treatments that have extended his time but ravaged his immune system. 8 months. Before he'd even met Camille." "That's not possible," she whispered. "We were together just yesterday." He was tired, but he was making plans, buying a house. Harrison has always excelled at creating the reality he wishes existed. Eleanor moved to the opposite side of the bed. The collapse wasn't directly related to the cancer. His body is fighting an aggressive infection his compromised immune system can't handle. Camille sank into the chair beside the bed, one hand protectively covering her stomach. "Why are you telling me this?" "Why let me in here?" Eleanor's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. "Because last night, while delirious with fever, my husband called for you." "Not me." She paused. "And because I found the ultrasound image in his wallet." The silence between them expanded, filled only by the mechanical sounds keeping Harrison alive. "Did you know about me?" Camille finally asked. "For months." Eleanor's smile held no warmth. "Did you know he promised to leave me after the merger?" Camille's flinch was answer enough. "He used the same timeline with his first affair 3 years ago, and the one before you." Eleanor's words landed like precise surgical strikes. "The merger is always coming. It never arrives." Before Camille could respond, the door opened and a doctor entered. His grave expression needed no interpretation. "The infection has entered his bloodstream," he explained. "We've adjusted his antibiotics, but with his compromised system..." He trailed off, medical euphemisms insufficient for the reality they faced. "How long?" Eleanor asked. "Days, perhaps hours." Camille couldn't breathe. The room spun around her as the doctor continued explaining treatment options that weren't really options at all. "He wanted to spare you," Eleanor said quietly after the doctor left. "In his own way, he thought he was protecting you both." "From what?" "The truth." "His illness?" Anger surged through Camille's grief. Or from you. From himself. Eleanor's composure finally broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. Harrison couldn't bear to be seen as weak. To be pitied. He wanted you to love the man he used to be, not the patient he's become. Later that night, Harrison briefly regained consciousness. His eyes flickered open, confusion clearing when he saw both women at his bedside. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice barely audible. "So sorry," Camille took his hand. "Why didn't you tell me? Wanted to give you everything." Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. "Our child deserves a father who could stay." Eleanor leaned closer. "You should have trusted us with the truth." Harrison's gaze moved between them, the two separate lives he'd tried to maintain now colliding at his deathbed. "My final board meeting," he said with unexpected clarity. "Two women stronger than I ever was." His eyes closed again, exhaustion claiming him. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, but something had shifted in the room. A truth acknowledged, if not accepted. Outside in the corridor, the doctor pulled Eleanor aside. "There's something else you should know. We found evidence of a secondary condition, a previously undiagnosed heart defect that likely contributed to his collapse." Camille overheard, a bitter laugh escaping her. Even Harrison's illness had kept secrets. Broken horizons, Harrison Reed died on a Tuesday morning as the sun broke through storm clouds. Camille wasn't there. Only Eleanor had been permitted to stay through the night. The call came as Camille stood in her kitchen, staring at a mug of tea gone cold. "It was peaceful," Eleanor told her, voice ragged from grief. "He didn't suffer at the end." The funeral became a public spectacle, broadcast on business news channels, attended by politicians and industry titans. Camille watched the live stream from her apartment, one hand resting on her growing belly. The eulogies painted a portrait of Harrison she barely recognized. Visionary, mentor, philanthropist. No one mentioned his fear of hospitals or how he hummed old Beatles songs when he was nervous. No one described the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. 3 days later, a courier delivered a package. Inside, Camille found legal documents establishing a trust fund for her child, along with a deed to the coastal property Harrison had promised. The house he'd never have a chance to show her. The last item was a sealed envelope with her name written in Harrison's distinctive handwriting. She couldn't bring herself to open it. A week passed. Then, too, Camille threw herself into her research, ignoring concerned glances from colleagues as her pregnancy became more visible. She avoided all news about Reed Telecommunications, about the merger that had finally been approved, about Eleanor's poised assumption of her late husband's position as CEO, the contingency plan the board had apparently agreed to months ago. Then came the knock at her door. Eleanor Reed stood in the hallway, designer handbag in one hand, a bottle of sparkling water in the other. "Non-alcoholic," she explained. "I thought we should talk." Reluctantly, Camille let her in. They sat in uncomfortable silence until Eleanor spoke. "I hated you," she admitted. "For months, I hated what you represented, that Harrison could still feel passion, just not for me anymore." Camille stared at her untouched glass. "I never meant to—" "I know." Eleanor's interruption was gentle. "That's why I'm here. Harrison left letters for both of us. Mine explained his reasons, his regrets." She nodded toward Camille's stomach. "And his hopes for your child. I haven't read mine yet." "You should." Eleanor reached into her bag, removing an envelope matching the one Camille had received. "But first, I need to tell you something Harrison couldn't bring himself to share." "What?" Followed was the story of a marriage that began as a love match but fractured, under the pressure of Eleanor's infertility and Harrison's ambition, their mutual decision to remain together as partners rather than lovers. The affairs Harrison believed Eleanor didn't know about. "We created a perfect facade," Eleanor said, so convincing that Harrison himself sometimes believed it. When he became ill, maintaining that illusion became even more important to him. "Why are you telling me this?" Camille asked. Eleanor's smile held genuine sadness. "Because Harrison asked me to look after you both. In his letter, he wrote that his greatest regret was leaving his child fatherless. I don't need your charity. It isn't charity." Eleanor set down her glass. It's the only thing left I can do for the man I spent 15 years with. And perhaps for myself as well. That night after Eleanor left, Camille finally opened Harrison's letter. His handwriting grew shakier toward the end, evidence of his declining strength. My dearest Camille, by the time you read this, I will have failed you in every way a man can fail someone he loves. I've built my life on calculated risks, but loving you was the only leap of faith I've ever taken. You deserved the truth from the beginning. The cancer diagnosis came before we met. I should have walked away that first day on the yacht, but you spoke about the ocean's memory, and I selfishly wanted to be part of what you might remember someday. Our child was the miracle I never expected. Please tell our daughter or son that their father was a coward in many things, but never in how much he loved them. Even before they existed. Eleanor knows everything. She's stronger than I ever gave her credit for, and wiser too. Trust her if you can. The house on the coast is yours without condition. The trust fund as well. These are poor substitutes for the lifetime I promised, but they're given with all the love I have left. Forgive me for the lies. Remember me for the truth between them, forever yours. Harrison Camille pressed the letter to her chest, finally allowing herself to cry for everything Harrison had been and everything he'd never have the chance to become. New constellations. 16 months later, Camille stood on the deck of the coastal home, watching her daughter toddle across the wooden planks on unsteady legs. Josephine Reed Foster had her father's storm-gray eyes and his determined expression when faced with a challenge, like the 3 wooden steps that currently separated her from the beach below. "Careful, Josie," Camille called, moving closer as the child navigated the first step with exaggerated concentration. The sound of tires on gravel announced Eleanor's arrival. These visits had become routine, monthly at first, then weekly, now almost every other day. What had begun as awkward obligation had evolved into something neither woman could have anticipated. "Is she still obsessed with the stairs?" Eleanor asked, appearing on the deck with a wrapped package under her arm. "Every vertical surface is Mount Everest to her," Camille replied, smiling as Josie succeeded in her descent and promptly sat down on the bottom step, clapping for herself. Eleanor set the package aside to pick up the little girl, who squealed in recognition. "Hello, my brilliant one. What mountains have you climbed today?" They moved inside as afternoon shadows lengthened. The house Harrison had chosen was perfect, modern yet warm, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean and a converted boathouse that now served as Camille's research laboratory. Photos of Harrison occupied select places, on the mantel, in Josie's nursery, in the hallway where Eleanor sometimes paused when she thought Camille wouldn't notice. "The board approved the conservation initiative," Eleanor announced over dinner, after Josie had been put to bed. $5 million annually for your research foundation, plus the partnership with Reed Tech's offshore monitoring systems. Camille poured more wine for them both. Harrison would have been proud. "He would have taken credit for the entire idea," Eleanor corrected with a wry smile, then charmed everyone into thinking it was their idea all along. They could speak of him easily now, their shared grief transformed into a strange kind of friendship. Eleanor had stepped into a role neither of them could have imagined, not quite family, more than a friend, an unexpected guardian of Harrison's memory for a child who would never know him. The merger Harrison had used as his perpetual excuse had indeed transformed Reed Telecommunications under Eleanor's leadership. She'd redirected significant resources into environmental initiatives, guided by Camille's expertise. The press called it Eleanor's tribute to her late husband's values. Only the 2 women knew the truth. It was her apology for the man he had failed to be. "I brought something," Eleanor said, retrieving the package she'd carried in. "Found it in Harrison's storage unit downtown. I thought Josie should have it someday." Inside was a battered copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with a child's name scrawled on the inside cover. Harrison Reed, age 10. "He told me his grandfather gave him this," Camille said, running her fingers over the worn spine. "The fisherman who inspired his interest in the ocean." Eleanor nodded. "One of the few true stories he told, I think." Later, as Eleanor prepared to leave, They stood on the deck watching moonlight create a silver path across the water. "Do you ever regret knowing," Eleanor asked suddenly, "about the affairs before you? About who he really was?" Camille considered the question, thinking of Josie sleeping upstairs. "No, the truth gave me context for loving him, flaws and all." "And it brought you into our lives." Eleanor's smile was genuine. "Who would have thought we'd end up here? The wife and the mistress, raising his child together. I prefer to think of us as two women who loved the same complicated man," Camille replied, "and who found something valuable in each other afterward." As Eleanor's car disappeared down the coastal road, Camille returned inside to check on Josie. The little girl slept peacefully, one arm flung dramatically across her pillow, another gesture inherited from Harrison. On the nightstand beside a photo of Harrison sat a small glass jar filled with seawater and tiny bioluminescent organisms, a living nightlight that cast gentle blue patterns across the ceiling. Camille had collected them during her research, inspired by something Harrison once said about finding light in the darkest depths. Tomorrow, Eleanor would return with architectural plans for expanding the research facility. They would disagree about the budget, compromise on the timeline, and end up sharing another bottle of wine while watching Josie discover something new about her world. They would mention Harrison when relevant and not dwell on him when it wasn't. Life hadn't unfolded as any of them expected. The billionaire had indeed promised forever, just not in the way anyone could have anticipated. His legacy wasn't the empire he built or even the child who carried his name. It was the unexpected constellation formed by two women who had every reason to hate each other, yet chose a different path. Camille kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Your father was right about one thing, little one. Love is the only truth that matters in the end." In the gentle darkness, surrounded by the sound of waves against the shore, that truth seemed enough.